Where history is silent, place names might speak. I absolutely love this quote by the Indian scholar S.V. Ramaswamy Iyer because it just perfectly captures what we're about to explore today. Think about it for a second. Every time you walk down a street or visit a town, the very ground you're stepping on is holding on to these hidden historical secrets, just waiting to be read. It's like a giant puzzle right beneath our feet. Welcome to this explainer on place names and East Sri Lankan Muslim culture. Today, we're going to look at how ordinary, everyday town names in Eastern Sri Lanka are actually, well, they're incredible time capsules. We're not just talking about labels on a map here. We are talking about living, breathing proof of centuries of cultural integration, shared history, and real harmony between different communities. Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at place names that speak history, followed by language and cultural integration. Then, we'll get into historical traces and myths, look at clans and folk literature, and finally, wrap up with place name traditions and the modern challenges they face. So, starting with Section 1, place names that speak history, the silent voices of the past. Have you ever wondered where your hometown's name actually comes from? This brings us to a really fascinating field called toponymy, which is literally the study of place names. Scholars often call these names time capsules or even fossils of the past. And that's because they preserve local history, forgotten languages, and deep cultural ties long after the original people have moved on. Now, globally, Muslim communities are often recognized historically as trading communities, right? But in Eastern Sri Lanka, there's this really unique twist. A huge portion of the Muslim community here has historically been deeply involved in farming, fishing, and weaving. And this shared connection to the land and the sea intimately intertwined them with the local Tamil-speaking population, which ended up forging a remarkably blended cultural identity right there on the coastal strip. Which brings us to Section 2, language and cultural integration, a truly blended identity. Now, what's really interesting about this is how these names break down like a linguistic puzzle. Sri Lankan place names usually combine a geographical terrain description, which is typically the suffix, with a specific attribute as the prefix. Just look at how beautifully the Tamil geographic terms and the Muslim cultural terms marry here. Take Mavadi Pali. Mavadi relates to nature, and Pali is an Islamic institution. Or Alim Shanai, where Ali means Islamic scholar, right? Combined with the Tamil word Chennai, which means cultivation land. I mean, this brilliantly illustrates a seamless linguistic integration. It's absolutely not about one culture dominating another. It's literally two cultures building a shared geographical identity together. And, it wasn't just concepts that became places. People literally became places too. In the early days of these settlements, Islamic spiritual leaders, scholars, and respected elders were central to the community. So out of sheer respect, the areas around their homes, or sometimes their final resting places, eventually just took on their names. So you get villages named Veriaryapa, Malukinpiti, and Ibrahimpiti. The geography here is quite literally memorializing the elders and saints who shaped the community's spiritual life. Moving right along to Section 3, historical traces and myths, traces of ancient battles. Okay, this is where it gets really epic. According to local folklore, back in the 5th century, a group called the Mukuvars were driven from Jaffna and they sought refuge in the east. But they faced some heavy opposition from the local Tamilars. So, to survive, the Mukuvars allied with Arab Muslims who had just landed on the coast, forming this powerful blood alliance. And this military campaign left a permanent geographic footprint that you can still read on a map today. First, you have Satru Kandan, which literally translates to the place where the enemy was killed. Then, as they advanced, they set up a strategic camp on high ground so the enemy couldn't breach it. And that place is still called Eiravur. Finally, after the victory, the resting place for the troops was named Vantramulai. So by just reading the names of these consecutive towns, you are literally tracing the exact path of an ancient military campaign. How cool is that? Let's shift gears to Section 4, clans and folk literature, tracking global trade. So, Eastern Sri Lankan Muslims have a highly unique matrilineal clan system, which is known locally as Kudi. But what's really fascinating here is that the names of these clans are essentially geographical trackers of historical migration and global trade. Notice clans like the Java Kudi. That points directly to ancestral ties with Java in Southeast Asia. Then you have the Malaya Lathulavai Kudi, tracing roots back to Kerala and India, while the Kosko Daka Kudi points to connections right within Sri Lanka itself. So these aren't just family names, they are ancient passports, proving the vast historical migratory connections of these coastal communities. And these towns are so deeply embedded in the local psyche that they feature heavily in everyday proverbs. Like, you'll hear people say, there is no village without crows, no place without Katankati people, which highlights just how widely traveled they are. Or they might say, if you miss Mecca, there is Maruthamanai, showing this immense regional pride. And, my personal favorite, a bit of ancient street smarts. Don't go to Puttalam no matter what, but if you do, go with sense. These proverbs bring a lot of lighthearted fun for sure, but they also show exactly how place names function as a kind of cultural shorthand for the personality of the towns themselves. Beyond the everyday proverbs, these place names were fiercely protected in traditional folk songs known as Natar Kavigal. The lyrics often weave through the geography like this. Will it be in a Karaipatu, or Karatavu, or Samantarai? These folk songs were incredibly important. Because they were passed down orally from generation to generation, they actually preserved the original, old names of these towns and regions. And that was absolutely crucial during times when official administrative records might have been altered or lost. The music itself was the archive. Which leads us into Section 5, Place Name Traditions and Modern Challenges, Threats to Heritage. Now, according to the sources, this centuries-old naming tradition is currently facing some pretty significant challenges. Modern administrative shifts, political attempts to rename areas for contemporary goals, and various forms of ideological purism are putting intense pressure on this shared geography. Changing a name from modern political goal might seem minor to some, but it actually risks erasing the delicate, deep-rooted multicultural history we've just unpacked. It essentially wipes the text right off these historical time capsules. So that leaves us with this vital question. Will future generations still be able to read these geographic time capsules, or will our shared multicultural history just be erased by modern administrative shifts? These place names in Eastern Sri Lanka are a beautiful testament to harmony, shared language, and historical coexistence. They remind us that our roots are often so much more intertwined than we realize. So thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep looking at the maps, keep asking where the names come from, and above all, stay curious.